Let's get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Kristin Snowden. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California. And this is a webinar that's dedicated to talk about all things relationships, from how to set boundaries to better understand maybe childhood wounds that show up in your relationship, and the obstacles that we face when we're running into conflict and struggle, from addiction, sex addiction, to just general run-of-the-mill couples issues. So today we are going to focus on the topic of trauma, again, because I think we can't talk enough about it. I think our society in general is becoming a lot more educated on it, but my feelings are the more I can bring you education, understanding, language, the more you can write a story of empowerment around it to get out of it, to transcend it. Because this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing overdoses, drug overdoses are at an all-time high. I mean, the percentages are always in the double digits each year. The percentage increases. Hospitalizations for suicide attempts and eating disorders are drastically high or drastically increasing. I'm seeing panic disorders, so people who have panic attacks or like agoraphobia, so fear of going out related to panic attacks, more than I've ever seen in my years of working as a mental health clinician. So these are all signs to me that many of us are struggling with the effects of trauma. You know, these are all symptoms of the effects of trauma. And I'm happy that webinars like this exist, and I'm happy that you're all here trying to learn more, because I think, well, you're not alone. Many of us are struggling with trauma, we love others who are in deep struggle as well. And when they're hurting, we're hurting. So I just really want to armor you with education and understanding. So let's talk about what trauma is. So the most general term is that trauma occurs anytime your nervous system gets deeply overwhelmed. So Scott Brasser gave me this really great metaphor to help me understand how trauma is different for all of us, which is, he always says, a race car driver getting in a car accident would be very different than just any of us getting in a car accident, right? The race car driver might have a different experience with it. It may have happened so many times. They feel maybe more control over it. They've gone through it and survived it so many times. So the first thing I want you to understand is that your trauma is different than your neighbor's trauma, is different than anyone else's trauma. We can all be exposed to the same kind of stressors, threats, fears, but our neurobiology is going to experience it and hold it and create symptoms very different from the person next to us. So that's something I really want you to understand and honor. So it'll happen anytime our nervous system it feels like it's overwhelmed. And in the ways that it will feel overwhelmed is if it will catch you off guard. So our bodies love safety. Safety equals predictability, consistency, and anything outside that realm really stirs up a lot of stress. I did a webinar a couple weeks ago, maybe now a month ago, on the fight, flight, freeze, fawn stress responses. And I really tried to educate you on what happens neurobiologically when we experience something out of the norm, something when we get blindsided by something, when we're afraid that we can't transcend something, that it's going to hurt us or harm us in some kind of way. So a traumatic event can also occur when it's something that you don't feel prepared for, or you don't know how to handle it. It can make you feel scared or helpless. It can lead you to feel shameful, disconnected from the world. And I'm going to talk about that more in a moment. You experience moments when you're not sure you're going to make it through that event. And there is a real or even just a perceived threat. And oftentimes there's this loss of time, like, how long is this going to last? How long am I going to be this way? How long am I going to have to live in this situation? Will I ever get over it? So this loss of time, right? I don't know. I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm kind of stuck in this abyss of pain and struggle. So in the most simple ways, trauma occurs when you lose the 4 C's: the loss of context, control, choice, and connection. So let me help you understand that. Loss of context happens anytime you are unsure, you're in a state of uncertainty, what's happening in this world, how you're going to survive this, what are the tools to get through this, the sense of kind of being, trapped in an unknown space. So the most common, accessible way of helping you understand that, as we've talked about, we've paralleled this to COVID, right? When we all went into lockdown in March 2020, it was traumatizing because there's this loss of context. How long? What is this disease? How many lives are going to be lost? What's going to happen to the economy? How am I going to make money? The context, we don't have the ability, when our brain cannot sink its teeth into more certainty and empowerment about how you're going to handle it, it goes into a traumatic state. It goes into a extreme stress state. And then it records it into your body. And this will feed into more when we talk about how to heal and transcend and move out of trauma, because the healing process for these 4 C's, the loss of control, context, choice, and connection, is the antithesis of that, right? The opposite of it. But I'll be talking about that in a moment. So loss of control and choice, these are 2 common things as well. This happened to me and at me. I had no control. I had no ability to stop it. I don't know how to get out of this. I have no choice. This is happening to me. A lot of you are here because you love an addict or your betrayed partner, and you feel like your whole life is at the whims of someone who makes really bad choices and continues to minimize how serious their problem is. Or you wonder, how long you're going to be, remember loss of time, how long you're going to feel traumatized by this, how long you're going to have these angry outbursts and pain and rejection from all of this. So you can definitely understand how you are experiencing trauma from the loss of context, control, and choice in the matter. And then the 4th is connection. So trauma, the biggest problem with trauma is that it disconnects you from your body. So an internal disconnection, what you're feeling, what your instincts are telling you, connecting your brain to your body, remembering who you are as a person and how you want to show up as a human and what you value in this world, through the context of like, okay, so then I'm going to act this way, I'm going to say this, I'm going to do this. You lose connection with all of that. I was just doing a betrayed partners group, and they were talking about how they can't track things, they can't remember things because they're in a state of trauma. Their higher functioning system is not able to operate because it's in that state of fight, flight, freeze kind of trauma. When's the next shoe going to drop? How do I need to respond? I'm not connected with myself. And then there's a disconnection with the community or environment around you, which is very consequential, which is that when bad things happen to us, there's a lot of shame that will happen. If you guys have watched any of my webinars, this is repetitive, but there's this kind of survival system in us that goes, okay, well, how, I would curl into a ball if I really started living my days as if I had no control, right? If I wouldn't be able to drive, if I didn't think I could assert any kind of control in the matter of I need to drive this speed, drive this way. So we put a lot of things through the filter of, it's my fault. I'm bad. I did something wrong. What's wrong with you that something like this happens? So that when you are traumatized through a traumatic event, there is either a very conscious, like obvious feeling, or an unconscious or subconscious feeling of like, what's wrong with me? And the consequence of that is often we tend to pull away, right? So the most obvious disconnection in your environment for betrayed partners would be I've been betrayed, I've been lied to. Who else is lying to me? Who could I possibly trust? And the other common story I hear is, if I was to tell my friends what happened, they would be like, well, leave the guy. Why are you even still in the marriage? What's wrong? Right. So lots of judgment, lots of pointing out how you're wrong, you're bad. What's wrong with you that you haven't left? So those things further traumatize you because they further your disconnection, and they further enforce or reinforce that shame story that there's something wrong with you. You're bad, you're wrong. So we experience trauma when we've lost those four things: the context of what's going on, how long, the time, the ability to get through, the uncertainty, the control, choice, and connection. And so according to the DSM, so let me just say this. So trauma also, something I want you to understand, besides the fact that your trauma is very different than somebody else's and their symptomology will show up differently than yours. There's no bento box, pretty packaged way of people receiving traumatic events and manifesting them out in symptoms. But the one thing I also want you to understand is, we think like textile likely, that when a bad thing happens, it can be this very serious event, like a car accident, someone dies. The very clear thing that's happening right now is this Ukrainian invasion, right? We all can kind of say, oh yeah, for sure, that would be traumatizing. But I spend a lot of time trying to help clients understand, or their families or loved ones, or the addicts themselves, understand how long-term complex trauma can occur when you're in a relationship where there is neglect, where there's like this constant invalidation of like, I'm feeling this way, I'm scared about this, are you cheating on me, why are you withdrawing from me, why don't you want to have sex with me, why do you speak to me that way, why when I ask you if we can go to therapy, is it like, no, you're the problem, it's your fault? Instead of saying, okay, why are you feeling unsafe, what do we need to do, I'm listening to you. Having feelings and emotions, and instead of someone being able to sit and witness them and try their best to understand them from your perspective, they just tell you you're too needy, or are you on your period, or what's wrong with you, why are you asking for these things. So this isn't a car accident that we're talking about. We're not talking about this very clear, something began, something ended, and I'm traumatized from it. This can be long-term, complex, insidious trauma that occurs when you are such a social creature. Again, if you watch my webinars, you understand that we are neurobiologically wired to connect and be loved by other people. Being validated by others is extremely important. We want to connect, we want to see others, be seen by others. And in the absence of that can create trauma. Because again, it creates this disconnection, this big unknown of like, what's wrong with me? Why do I want this, but I feel like I can't get it? And why does this feel so unsafe? And there's that concept too of gaslighting, right? I keep saying that this is my experience, I'm concerned about this. And you just turn around and say, no, you're wrong, this is bad, this is not going to happen. A story recently that was interesting is a betrayed partner was talking about how, the partner's kind of trying to get in recovery, kind of owns they shouldn't have affairs, or, so there's that little piece of validation. But she just found out he had like a bunch of inappropriate work relationships, right? Where there was inappropriate talk. And instead of the person saying, you've been betrayed by me, and I've really blindsided you with things that you didn't see. I definitely didn't give you all the information you needed to make the right choice for yourself, for this family. I've denied you love, affection, connection. Instead of him responding that way, it was like, what's the big deal? I sent a couple funny memes to so-and-so or to this. And that is traumatizing, because it's this constant, like, what is going on here? Like, am I not allowed to get my needs met? So I just want you to understand that trauma doesn't have to just come in one kind of really clear, concrete box of this very specific thing happened. My nervous system was overwhelmed. I was very scared. And then now I'm like healing and recovering from that. It can happen in these very insidious ways within relational trauma. That's what they call it, betrayal trauma, where there might be feelings of emotional abuse, neglect, invalidation, right? Consistent invalidation, emotional manipulation, gaslighting. And I have another webinar, I think a couple weeks ago on it about, I don't even remember what it's called, Tammy. I think it was like, is loving an addict or being in a relationship with an addict emotionally abusive? And I kind of talk about what happens there in those types of relationship dyads and those dynamics. So this is a list of PTSD. So post-traumatic stress disorder, the DSM-5, which is pretty old and outdated at this point, but nonetheless, we'll still reference it. They say, look, you might have post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And officially qualify for it if you have the following symptoms. And I think it's like 5 out of the 7 or 8 of these that I'm going to list. Were you exposed to something threatening of some kind, where you had fear of death, fear of harm to yourself or others, serious injury, violence? That's again where I think the mental health world still has it wrong. We don't quite understand how traumatizing relational, insidious, long-term complex trauma can be. So, and how scary it can feel when you have this partnership with somebody, you've raised kids with them, you've made investments in them in your partnership, and you've trusted them, you've been naked with them, you've exposed yourself to the vulnerability of this other person, to find out that they've been living a double life, that they've been saying something and presenting something to your face and doing something completely behind your back. That's absolutely shocking to your nervous system and absolutely threatens everything you know to be your reality, to be most important to you. So absolutely, that would qualify as like fear and threat to your life, to your children's life, to your family, that it, to your own instincts and sanity that you've had, systematically questioned and manipulated. So the following DSM-5 criteria for PTSD diagnosis is that the exposure, then also unwanted or upsetting memories. So do you have flashbacks? Are you, do you wish that you didn't have memories of where you sat and where he or she told you this really terrible information, or when you accidentally opened up the computer and saw something you didn't mean to see, or when someone wrote you and told you this really upsetting, life destroying information about your partner, or when he or she, came clean about something? Those are upsetting memories. You wish you didn't have them, and they come at you. They feel like they come at you again, out of control, they're not within your control and your context. They come at you, kind of like a really bad movie that you didn't wish was on in front of you. Nightmares. How many people are experiencing really uncomfortable, upsetting nightmares? I said flashbacks too, but flashbacks are similar to memories. Emotional distress from all of those things, right? Seeing the memories, nightmares, flashbacks. We've talked about this, but emotional, physical stress from these, that's 2 things, right? So a lot of you have gastrointestinal issues, breakout in hives, you have autoimmune issues, you have struggled sleeping. Some of you have panic attacks. Panic attacks are so everywhere right now. It might manifest in you raging, right? And that's not who you have been. You have decades of history that you don't throw things and you don't scream expletives. And then here you are, like a demon taking over your body, and you are doing these things and they are out of character. Those are signs of PTSD and that you've been traumatized. Avoidance of the stimuli at all costs. I know so many betrayed partners who won't drive by that hotel, who will cut out certain groups of friends because they're just too many reminders, or they don't want to, talk about what happened. Avoidance of anything that triggers unpleasant memories or emotional distress, etc. And then altered mood. You're more irritable, aggressive. You're engaging in higher risk or destructive type behaviors. You feel very hypervigilant, right? Constantly questioning someone's face expression, why they said what they said. Do they really need this? Or, do they not like me? Are they someone I can trust? I'm not really sure. And this constant distrust of other people, other circumstances. You can't take anything anybody says at face value because there's got to be some other story that you're missing, right? And oh yeah, I have so much evidence that my instincts have failed me and I, got bamboozled, whatever the words are, for yourself, that I found myself in this deceptive world, then I can't trust my ability to connect with others, trouble sleeping, startled reactions. Also, remember that short-term memory loss where I need someone to tell me something 13 times. I see that and hear about that all the time. So we've talked about what trauma is. So hopefully at this point you really understand, and there's a lot of people going like, aha, okay, yeah, I definitely have trauma. Okay, so what, Kristin? What do I do about it? Well, two current approaches to trauma healing that I've been getting certified in and reading about are EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and then IFS, internal family systems, which that name's terrible. I wish they would change it. A lot of the names involved in IFS is terrible, but I will do my best to help you understand what happens in these two trauma treatments so you can determine if they're right for you and help you understand why they might work. And I know I already get a ton of comments on my webinar or from my webinars about, oh, EMDR is ridiculous. It's a bunch of voodoo and stuff. Let me emphasize this. Whatever trauma treatment works. So if it's just talk therapy and you find that to be relieving, or yoga and mindfulness practices and you find that to be relieving, then great, like awesome. But there's a lot of science and research and studies that backed up EMDR. Francine Shapiro, who created it, went to extreme lengths over the decades that she was alive, trying to prove that this worked. So there's a lot of research for it. And internal family systems is semi-ish new. It's not. I mean, it's been around for decades as well. But he's worked really hard to help create large study groups to show the efficacy of internal family systems. So the last part of this is going to be me just telling you a little bit what EMDR is and IFS, and you can decide, are these types of treatment right for me? There might be other things like somatic experiencing, again, just work groups, being in community, working the 12-step program. There's a trauma resiliency practice that can occur there. Back when I did my webinar on the fight, flight, freeze, the stress responses to our body, the Dr. Huberman that I was mentioning from his podcast was talking about research shows that you have to do some level of kind of exposure to what the traumatic event was, or the multiple traumatic events. And there has to kind of be this like validation, and then what they call like a down regulation that's associated with it. And then there has to be this narrative that comes in. So the way I take that is I've learned the 4 things that are necessary, which is I have to understand that what happened was not okay, right? So kind of go back, this was not okay, this was not okay. Have someone else be present for it and kind of say, yeah, you're right. There's like this validation, either from its groups or therapists or whatever, this validation that was not okay. And then I guess it's 3 steps, is a story of empowerment around it. So that, we take on a lot of responsibility. So it's maybe turning the responsibility back on the person who harmed you, that it had nothing to do with you, that maybe you did your best in that situation, but now you know more, or now you know better, and you're going to do better. So those are kind of the general elements that when you look at trauma treatment, they have those overlaps. So EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So this is the actual script from EMDR. When a disturbing event occurs, I can get locked in the brain with the images sounds, thoughts, feelings, and body sensations. EMDR seems to stimulate the information and allows the brain to process the experience, hence the reprocessing, eye movement, processing, reprocessing. Desensitization, so like downregulation, and then reprocessing. EMDR seems to stimulate the information and allows you to process the experience. That may be what is happening in REM or dream sleep. There's a lot of controversy around that. So more will be revealed, but there's no doubt there's a lot of science that actually the state of moving your eyes back and forth does do some kind of level of like down regulation, relaxation, calming yourself. It is your own brain that will be doing the healing, and you are the one in control. So both IFS and EMDR have this general theory that your body knows how to heal itself. And they just need to get the crap out of the way, right? The blaming, the shame, the distorted conclusions, the fear of like, I'm powerless, or this situation's always going to be unsafe no matter what, or your locus of control, that I can't trust myself, I can't trust my instincts, or I'm weird, or there's something wrong with me, or I'm unlovable. So the idea is that if we can get those things out of the way and then process the traumatic event, we can kind of refile it into a more functional system in your body, so it doesn't get locked in and stuck and continue to cause all these physiological and emotional problems that show up, which I listed for the PTSD, right? That kind of stuff. So the mechanism of action, how it works, there's the eye movements. They also have the bilateral stimulations. I have my thing right here, but it's like buzzers or beeping on the sides. Apparently the person that I'm getting consultation with says that still eye movement is supposed to be the best way, but again, more is to be revealed. So that also what happens is taxation of memory. We hold the memory while using these down regulation techniques. And the more we kind of talk about it and process it, the less vivid it becomes, and it lowers the discomfort around it. Then memory reconsolidation is you access and you update it with new learning. So remember I said that a lot of the trauma resiliency process is about a new narrative, a story of empowerment. So, if this wasn't your fault, you were victimized, you were, for let's say betrayed partners, it's a lot of like that person was invested in you not knowing the truth, but now you know what it looks like. Now you know what questions to ask. You've given yourself permission to set boundaries and ask questions. And, now you're living with a lot more information, and now you've reconnected with your instincts and intuition. And these are the ways that you're going to keep yourself safe. This is a way we're going to pack your parachute. So if you need to jump, you can jump. Before you didn't even know, you were like a frog boiling in a pot, realizing something was off, but now So right, memory reconsolidation, updating the information. What does it explore? Distorted conclusions about yourself or the situation, right? I'm not valued, I'm not loved, this was my fault. Safety and vulnerability around the situation, the trauma. So present fear paralysis due to past trauma, like I'm not safe, the situation's not safe, that person's not safe. Challenges locus of control and choice. I'm powerless, I have no control, I can't trust myself. Connecting and belonging. So that struggle with interpersonal rejection, internalized pain, mistreatment of others. And it's done through, you kind of identify particular memories, you identify the negative thought you have about yourself around that. Well, this is just proof that I'm not enough, or that, I'm unlovable, or that, I can never trust myself, or I'm not respected. And then you figure out the desired belief that you'd rather have about yourself, where you feel this memory or this trauma in your body, and then you reprocess it. And it's a pretty open-ended system, actually. So far, so good. I think it's very interesting. Definitely a tool in the toolbox. So the last one I'm going to talk about is internal family systems. This is the one I know less about because I'm not getting certified in it. but it's essentially, it's this idea that we all have parts of ourselves. We have, through our development of ourself, through being exposed to these rules and life of our culture, and then we have all these rules and things that we learn in our immediate family system, and then we go to school and we learn all these parts. You learn that we have all these kind of like stories we're telling ourselves. In internal family systems, some people will actually get into parts. Like, I have Julie, the feisty one who wants to go out and have fun. And then I have, Bruce, who's telling me, no, you have to be a rule follower and you have to like have fun and you have to get all your work done. And then I have, Susie, the little child in me that's scared that she's unlovable, and everyone enters into IFS at different levels. Some people, they'll just identify as surfacey, like I was talking to a client recently and he's getting divorced, and there's a part of him, and he didn't want to be divorced. And there was a part of him that was like, well, the old me before when I was single, I really enjoyed having parties. I loved being social, and I want to start exploring that again. But then there's this whole other part of him that's like, well, no, you failed. You blew it with the divorce. If you go out and start having a party, then you are going to look like the guy who's just trying to like put on airs to like make up for the fact that you had a failed marriage. And that's a really great demonstration of these very contradictory experiences internal to himself. So the IFS is essentially saying we all have these different parts. None of them are bad. Even like when we talk about addiction in the internal family system, it's talking about how at some point addiction was your best solution to whatever was going on. And now it doesn't work for obvious reasons. And now it's creating a conflict. But back in the day, there was a part of you that, despite these other parts that were like, don't cheat, you made promises, you're a schmuck, you feel crappy, you're such a liar, you're such a loser, you would still go out and do the addiction. So you could definitely see those different parts kind of rumbling within themselves. And so at some point it was like, okay, well, maybe that part was really just trying to save me from the pain, because it thinks, and this is the other part of internal family systems, it's this idea that there's these young, injured exile parts that don't know that you're an older, more adapted, more wise person that has, as I tell all clients, 100% evidence of surviving the day. As of right now, you have 100% evidence. It may not be pretty. You may need to, do those prayers and make those amends the next day. But so far, you have 100% evidence of surviving. And there's these parts of yourself that are traumatized and scared, and they're trying to control you or manage it or use unhealthy coping skills to kind of control the outcome, because it doesn't trust you. It doesn't trust your ability to make the next right choice, to handle and tolerate the messiness of life, the scariness of those feelings of shame and hurt and all those things that I mentioned for EMDR, that it's my fault, I'm powerless, I'm unsafe. And so internal family systems kind of goes into each of these parts, so to speak, identifies those parts where you find it. It does these really great things where it's kind of like, well, imagine there was this, you, like, let's say there's you, I'm with a betrayed partner, and she's talking to me about how she was throwing things in the house and raging, and she's so ashamed, but she's so angry at her partner. And then so I would ask her to look, like, pretend like you're looking out of the window into her at the kitchen, smashing plates. And it'd be like, okay, well, a part of me is like, what the hell is wrong with her? She's crazy. Okay, well, what's another part? What are you watching? Well, she's sad. Like, look at her. This is not what she signed up for. And then we kind of dive into those different parts, right? The part that's judging her. How do you feel about the part that's sad? Well, don't be sad. The angry part's the one that feels in control. And as long as I'm angry and I'm asserting control in the situation, maybe that fear will be strong enough for my husband to keep his stuff together so he stops ruining our life, right? But then we talk about that, what if that angry person could take a break? What would it look like? And it's just a really, really interesting way of entering the problem, entering the pain, kind of figuring out these different parts that come up. What do you think about that part? And then talking to that part, which is kind of weird for some people, including me, obviously, by the way I'm talking about it, but saying like, how do you feel about it? What do you think about it? Why are you doing this? Why do you keep acting out, even though you've made promises and you don't want to hurt your family anymore? What do you get from doing this behavior? What did you go through in life that made you feel like this was the best choice? What happened to you? When did you learn that this was the best way to deal with this problem? How do you feel? What are you thinking? What are the physical sensations going on? And spend some time with each one of those parts. It's a really, really interesting way of connecting with the problem, with the pain, and kind of, again, it's that exposure to what's happened, but the story of empowerment around it. What if we could negotiate? What if I could tell you, I got this? Like, I can do recovery. I can tolerate the feelings. It's going to be yucky and messy, but you can survive this. How would you feel then? Okay, well, then maybe I can let go a little bit. It's really, really interesting. And then I told you there was other trauma approaches using your community, 12 steps, mind-body connections, down-regulation techniques. And that is it for the trauma treatment options.
But so much good stuff. I wrote down right off the bat, siblings, because like you think about siblings having often very similar exposure, in early childhood, let's just say, whatever, and their reactions and how they tolerate, you talked about the race car driver, taking a car crash in a very different way than I would right now, so it's one of those where it's just always fascinating to me, what comes up. And I was sure thinking about how, COVID feels like it has been, a worldwide trauma on so many levels, and the disconnection, and when will things be safe, and all of the things that we've had to go through. And then how many people have had discovery of what their partner was doing, so they're already dealing with societal trauma, and then on top of this, very real trauma. The reaction of like, I can't complete a thought, I can't, like, I know I've heard this 13 times, but I can't remember, like, and giving yourself grace to just go, I'm doing the best I can. I there's so much to unpack with that. I was shocked kind of when you said that, people are giving you grief about EMDR, because like, it was hugely beneficial for me. The stuff, I had a very real thing, and just to be able to process through that, and it has never returned, in that way. We have internal family systems, both for male addicts and female partners. We have a drop-in group for those every week on our sex and relationship healing.com site. We don't have somatic experience, but all the stuff that you talked about, like, I hear inner child stuff. Well, Eddie Caparucci does that. Right. Troy Love does attachment wounds. All of those things, it's just different ways of looking at. And I really think, find what helps you in the moment. It may be, well, this helped me for this component of it, but now I need to do this. All good, but the somatic experiences, somebody added in the chat, is it possible to develop psoriasis or other autoimmune diseases? You talked about that. I hear often from betrayed partners who are struggling with real medical issues, of the chronic post-traumatic stress. And while you are correct, the DSM is out of date. I just got an article, and I'll send it to you, on the ICD-11, and they are updated. Did you see it already? Okay. They are updated.
They've just always been more advanced than the DSM has been willing to.
So I'll send you that article, because they updated, sexual compulsion, but they also updated post-traumatic stress. And I love that they're exploring this in a more humane, I think, and larger version way. So, yeah, and trauma, I mean, it's one of those where, abandonment or neglect, those are traumas of a form. We may go, oh yeah, I was abandoned or I was neglected, but at the end of the day, it still resonates within us, on a trauma level. So I've got bunches of questions. So I want to get to this. But so yes, due to living with high stressors going into trauma, I've never read Body Keeps Score book. There's podcasts and things about that as well. But yes, very, very real body reactions. Did you want to comment on
I'd encourage you to watch a couple of my webinars on the autonomic nervous system, so betrayal trauma and how it impacts the autonomic nervous system, plus that fear, stress, and trauma webinar I just did a couple months ago that really just helps you understand why people have autoimmune issues, why they can have autoimmune issues, gut issues, right? Stomach problems, and other physical symptoms as a consequence of being under long-term stress and trauma.
And doing the things that you talked about, the body work, to help, calm that down. And I love that you use the word empowering, because, like the stuff that happens to us, whether it's a car accident, betrayal trauma, COVID, whatever has happened to us, but we are left in a position of being a victim unless we are able to to find a way of being empowered, through I was not doing well. My therapist told me to be intentional and to remember that I had choices in COVID. And that was a game changer for me, because I was, otherwise I'm a victim of everything that's happening to me. Wah, wah, wah. Like that's where I was. Right. I was horrible. But to go, yeah, I have less choices, but I have choices. Huge shift, and being intentional. So finding even little incremental things of being empowered in that moment. Okay, I'm going to do my breathing. I'm going to do my mindfulness. I'm going to do something for me to help, to help calm down the trauma response. So, okay, first question. I am an SA. Only when I started therapy with a CSAT a year ago was I made aware of my traumas from my childhood. My CSAT doesn't want to start immediately trauma work because too much is going on in my life at the moment. I've done an inventory list with descriptions, and only my first two traumas have stuck in my mind, and I've been minimized or ignored all the other ones. Survival. Any suggestions on how to start dealing with my trauma? I just need to know, because it's holding me back in my past, inner child. So.
Well, it sounds like you are already doing work on your trauma. So understanding what's happened to you is definitely a part of working towards the trauma. I would trust your therapist, and or if you're seeing a sponsor, because the idea is that, the ego is fragile, and the traumatized ego is fragile, and you currently are trying to live without what was your favorite coping skill at the time. So it's kind of that perfect storm of dealing with the storm of life, but with very little protection. You're learning new skills to deal with discomfort, new skills to acknowledge the shame and pain and hurt. So your therapist and sponsor are probably just trying to make sure that you have the skills, the toolbox, the support, the community, to get through diving into those traumas, right? You had that addiction because it was the best distraction, numbing, intensity seeking way of getting out of your trauma, out of your pain, out of your discomfort. So we really want to make sure that your clinical team has created a new support system for that.
Well, and for me, I had this one specific issue, and my therapist did EMDR with me on that one specific issue. And so it isn't like unpacking everything, but having some, just calming down, so that, I mean, the stuff is still there. And if I think about it, like, it's unpleasant maybe, but I'm not having that full body reaction to it. So it shifted that for me and gave me more bandwidth so that it didn't have to be so triggering. So there may be components where you work on those two specific things in a very contained way without trying to unpack everything, on the planet, and I guess my point is layers, this one's bothering me. I'm having nightmares. Work on that. Okay. That makes sense. So, okay.
Yeah. And every therapist is different. Some will
Mhm.
just dive right in because they feel really confident in their abilities to support you and help you contain the hurt and struggle. Some aren't, and that's okay.
So this says, I know this is me, my needing to work through triggers, but I'm getting triggered by your cute, oh, I'm sorry. But your cute top with bare skin. If my husband was or watching this, I think he would be questioning if you're wearing a bra. I'm sorry, but I felt I needed to share. Love your topic. I'm sorry. This is I think you look fabulous and very appropriate, and I don't,
No, but it's great.
and
It's
yeah, no,
courage to say
in the
that
world,
this is the
right?
kind of stuff that we struggle
Yeah,
with. The rest of
right.
her stuff was just saying, I want to share my trigger with you.
Yeah,
And I want to like really honor your courage to say it out loud,
Mhm.
and B, acknowledge that this is the the cross to bear, so to speak, stuff that you never had cross your mind. And now these are the things that you have to struggle with and negotiate. And that is absolutely an extension of your trauma, the way you've experienced your powerlessness, your hurt, your fears. And I think it's great that you're acknowledging your traumas. I'm sorry, your triggers. And I hope that you have a supportive therapist that you can start taking them in, maybe doing that parts work, right? What's your fears regarding other, women and the way that they dress, and how you are afraid of the way that they, your partner or your husband is perceiving them. There's a lot of work to be done there, but of course you couldn't even start the work unless you realized that it was a major trigger for you. So good for you.
Thank you. It's always been interesting to me because, like, I know in treatment centers, many of them will have, closed-toed policy or something because it's like, having open shoes is triggering. And I'm like, but in the real world, all of these things are there.
Right.
So having the ability to work on, okay, this is bothering me. What do I need to do? To
Right.
calm this down. And I am sorry that, the story that gets caught instead of being able to focus on, on whatever on life is, oh, I have to worry about how everybody's, looking
Mhm.
and dressing and everything because my partner, who I'm supposed to be able to trust is triggered by all of this, and now I'm triggered by this. and
Right.
and I really struggle with this. Is my personal struggle that women get, rather than looking at, we are supportive of each other and we have to be allies, that we get put in the, we're the problem. I hate that. It's like, unfortunately, this person has issues, has brokenness, and it's their job to be working on that so that, we can be supportive of each other. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So right now, my wife has gone back and forth on divorce. We separated, then got back together, and I'm back in the house. And she does not respect her decision. Oh, and she does not respect her decision and is questioning why she got back with me and canceled the divorce process. She is now sleeping in a different bedroom. She has communicated to me that she needs to be a whole person before she can work on our relationship again. We have a couples counselor that she does not want to attend. How can I show up for her and work on our relationship while she does not want to work on our relationship?
That is the ultimate question that many struggle with. I guess you can always work on the way you show up in the relationship. You can ask questions, right? I always joke that couples therapy, you have to come at it from like you're two aliens from another universe. And there's just this genuine anthropological curiosity about the other person that has nothing to do with me. Your story of your universe and your alien existence is separate from mine, and I just want to know more. So sometimes showing up that way and letting that person share his or her story, you not be reactive to it, you just kind of listen to it and take it in as information. So much harder said than done. Obviously, there's so much pain that's been exchanged. We do have very shame we have bodies that are just meant to take information in as shame. I'm bad. I did something wrong. I did this to you, whatever it is. But you just have to kind of take it in as more information. That's probably the best work you can do.
Yeah. And, I was like, can you have the conversation of, like, is separating again, what she feels she needs to do? I mean, I would talk to her. What does she see? Or, what is her path to feeling like she is a whole person again? Like, what is she looking to do, and how can you support her becoming that whole person? Maybe it's that, it's about how do you help support her, you know, um, in that effort, not about, everything else, but, what is it she's looking for from you to help her feel more whole?
Right.
This next person is, I have not acted out since December of 2020, but she continues to be triggered by things which are causing her to feel hopeless about our marriage. I don't know if that's a continuation of the last one.
No, I'm not sure either.
Okay.
Right. That's the classic thing of really helping her understand. So maybe a therapist, that what exactly is still causing her to feel unsafe. It's been a year and a half. Sometimes it's that it hasn't been as, you may have stopped acting out, but there might have been instances where she feels like you minimized the severity of something, maybe some truths leaked out in a different way that made her still feel unsafe. You don't know, but I always take someone's feelings of being triggered and feeling hopeless as that's just a feedback loop system for me to inquire about. Right. I think if you watch my webinars, I sometimes try to look at clients as like a nervous system, right? If I'm agitated and moving around and I'm looking at you and I'm saying, okay, you're agitated, you're moving around. Those are signs to me that something's going on. Can you identify what's going on? Oh, I just have these things looping around in my head. I have these fears. What are the current threats? Are they real? And is there any level of context, choice, connection that I can offer the person? What helps you feel safer? Do you need a hug? Do we need more date nights? Do you need to see my phone more often to make sure that I'm not acting out? Is it all about the trauma? Is it all about the history? Does he or she need EMDR or IFS or some kind of down regulating trauma? Because remember, the removal of the threat doesn't get rid of the trauma. There's usually trauma treatments are required for that. So I don't know. What do you think, Tammy?
Well, I hear I haven't acted out since December 2020. That's called abstinence to me. So what are you doing? I'm glad you're here, but what are you doing to become, the person of integrity, to show that to create that trusting space? So from that standpoint, like, the more action, and I say this all the time, the more action that you are doing that shows, that you are changing. Dr. Rob wrote Out of the Doghouse and How to Rebuild Trust. And I was sharing with somebody yesterday, he says all the time, you don't have to do these things, but if you don't want to rebuild trust, don't be in the relationship. So, there is a work group, Out of the Doghouse, 6 weeks course to help you gain those skills to rebuild trust. It doesn't magically fix everything, but it sure is a foundational component of it. And those are something that you can actively do. But it just stopping the behavior is like sticking the Band-Aid on. It really is about transforming, and becoming a different person. So. The next question, and I put a link in the chat, can I practice IFS without doing it with a therapist trained in any workshops, online courses, et cetera, that I can practice this model? And we have both for the addict, as I mentioned, Joseph Eder does one weekly for the guys, and then for the partners, there's one with Heather Putney. So the drop-in group is on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. If you look at the online support, you'll see the list of them. The events shows the calendar of it, so you can find those either way, and that would be a good place to start and see if it's a fit. I hear very good things, and people are finding that really useful. Obviously, ideally, someone who's trained to guide you, as things are coming up, could be very helpful, but you can start there and see if it's a fit. So
yeah, that's great. There's also I was actually just talking to someone who did No Bad Parts is the most recent book written by Dr. Richard Schwartz, who did create the IFS model. And it is meant to be for people like non-therapists who are trying to practice them. So the person was saying that she joined like a book study related to it, and she would listen to the book, do the exercises, talk about it. So I actually thought it sounded really great. And it's, it's non-therapy driven, which might be a good, accessible, affordable option.
Yeah, but I love that joined a book study to talk about it too.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
So that you aren't just sitting here with all this stuff that comes up. There's a place to go. So
we are big believers of group work. I think you all understand.
Yes.
The magic happens in the group, not sitting alone with those deep, dark, crazy thoughts that you have going on.
Yes. Unfortunately, too often addicts, so partners get caught in that. I don't want to tell anybody that I don't, whatever, but addicts go, oh, I'm going to read a book, or I'm going to figure this out. And I'm like, the reason you're in trouble is because of your best thinking got you there. Right. So yes, get help. Okay. Next question. We've been married for 24 years. My husband has never been open to sharing with me his recovery journey. Just recently, I asked him to let me know if there have been any triggers, slips, or relapses. When I asked him for that previously, he refused, saying he only speaks to his sponsor and therapist. I found out that he is rigorously honest about a hard program. He also has ADHD, and it's taken him a long time to do the work. He's been in SA and now SAA, but has not completed all 12 steps. Recently, I indicated that I needed to know about triggers, slips, and relapses. My spouse refuses to give me that information. He says he will speak to his sponsor first. The problem is that his sponsor is frequently unavailable. My spouse wants me to wait until he has spoken with his sponsor. I feel he is being unreasonable. I would appreciate knowing what are other options other than in-house separation, which I have started. I feel I am not safe with him, nor can I trust him. He does not inform me of recovery. So Dr. Rob has talked a lot about this. So slips and relapses, yes. Triggers, I mean, that is like every time he's triggered is not probably what a betrayed partner needs to hear. So, but I hear you feeling really unsafe. So Kristin, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'd encourage you to join a betrayed partners group as well, if you can. And also, I guess, I'm not sure what the status is about exploring couples therapy too, because if he's running a pretty good program, as you're saying, it might be time to start working on repairing, the rupture that's occurred within your relationship, where you can share with a mediator present how you still don't feel safe with him, that the steps that he's taking, right, and help him with appropriate boundaries when sharing his trigger or his relapse and, with his circle plan and stuff like that with you. So that might be something. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Oh, I just threw the Thanos check-in. We talk about that regularly too. I mean, that's one of those where that's a great start with communication. It's 2 minutes, you each are sharing and you're getting information, because what I really hear is he's not forthcoming. You're feeling left in the dark, probably about everything, not just about recovery. So there should be some transparency. And then there should be some things that, he is talking to his sponsor. If he had a slip, slips are, he's come to you and told you he's had a slip. A relapse is you find out about it later, but a slip, I mean, so it feels like and you've been married 24 years. I don't know where he is in the process. I hear that you're saying he's working hard on it, but it still feels like he's very early in this, because it sounds like he doesn't have a lot of foundational tools. Hopefully he's joined the Sex Addiction 101 work group. If he hasn't, there's another one starting. There was one that started last Saturday. There's another one starting June 3rd. Highly recommend get more structure, and then there's more peers to talk about. There's more guidance. He'd have a much better plan, so to speak. But if you've started, if you're working with your therapist and start a therapeutic separation within the home, that may be exactly what you need for your safety right now. That's okay, as long as there's a plan for, and this is what I'm looking for, so that we can come back together. But making sure you've got good support for you, with all of this too, that's okay. I'm a betrayed partner with autoimmune issues, living with PTSD as well. How do I deal with my spouse's PTSD from his own trauma, as well as the addiction, while finding my own healing? I know I need to come first, but I want to support him. There's sounds like plenty of trauma going, for everyone to go around.
Yeah. Again, I think it's that alien from outer space inquiry, asking questions from a space of curiosity. Again, that I can't heal the PTSD, but I can ask what he or she wants or needs, just like I have the right to ask for needs and wants. Maybe do they feel like you're doing what you need to do? Like, that's the thing, is there's just so many questions about that. Your PTSD, their PTSD, what does it look like? How do you feel when you see him or her go through it? And just kind of paint a broader picture of what's going on.
And I go back to, you have to put your oxygen mask on first, so you are, we can't help anybody else if we're in a place of pain, ourselves. So we talk about this often, creating the support, you having your support, him having his support. It's okay for you guys to get the support from other people, other betrayed partners for you, other addicts for him, and then as things, kind of calm down and you can find those places to connect, then it can be different. So, okay, next question. Betrayed partner or betrayed male here. I'm very familiar with symptoms in the early stage of trauma from betrayal, hypervigilance, and anger. What symptoms would a later stage possess as you move out from D-Day and gain more emotional balance? I'm a little over a year out and wondering what I should be looking inward for.
There's just so many. I don't know the answer to that. I guess it would just be, again, like the flashbacks, the music, the ruminating thoughts, the heart rate going up, the avoidance of certain areas because of bad memories associated with it, being quick to anger about something that normally you wouldn't be angry about, a higher level of anxiety or stress over something that you normally didn't used to be super anxious or stressed about. So it really is varied. It absolutely is varied. So it's good for you to start understanding what your general triggers were and could be, and then that helps you to kind of work backward from there.
Yeah, and I think the stages, it may even shift into grieving and losses and all of those type of things too. So, okay, next question. I put the Thanos check-in. That's just one form of check-in, but I put it in there too. Since my husband has been using porn since 15 years of age, and since our marriage is over 20 years, he uses Asian pornography. These beautiful and amazing women are triggers to my exclusion, since it is so obvious to me when there are dear women, and I am very triggered. My husband tells me he adheres to the 3-second rule. However, I see him looking at a trigger, then turning away and then doing it again. He's not adhering to the 3-second rule. So that is not what the 3-second rule is. This is very disturbing, understandably. What suggestions or advice or coping mechanisms? My therapist has told me if I'm noticing him, I am not present. I am traumatized when he looks away from me, when I notice he's looking at triggers. I cannot trust him because of this behavior. Do I refuse to go anywhere with him? He acts out often when we are in crowds, grocery stores, etc. Is it too controlling for me to go forward and find a safe space for myself and ask him to enter when I feel safe? What actions can I implement? I love that you're asking this. So thoughts?
Yeah, bottom line is you don't sound or feel safe
Yeah.
around him, and you don't respect him and the way he's handling this situation, and you don't trust that he's actually following through with what he's saying. And you question that whole other secondary, really scary decision-making thought process that goes on in his brain that has destroyed your life as you know it. So it's going to be really hard for you to want to feel vulnerable when those red flags are still flying high. So it's just the simple things. It can, like, he can be abstinent, but still not behaving in a way that's showing this is a new human who is working on being better, doing better, understands me, is sensitive to my needs, realizes that what he was doing was wrong, and just a like intense seeking, distraction seeking way of getting out of himself. So these are all really important things that should be present that would make you feel safer, ideally. So what actions to implement is maybe start developing a better language for it, but you've kind of written it out pretty well, which shows me you do know. Again, I ask about, are you in couples therapy? Is there a place where you can share these concerns and where you can get hope? Are there consequences, right? Boundaries of, if I keep seeing you act out this way and I continue to not feel safe, this is what I'm going to have to do, because I just don't trust you or feel safe with you or feel like, this is going okay. So
Yeah. And first of all, he probably needs to call his sponsor before he goes out with you and bookend it. So I'm going to out with my wife. I'm committing that I'm going to be present with my wife, not, and then calls after the outing, so that it isn't, so that he's bookending that's for him to do. The 3-second rule is not, keep looking back, and maybe instead of turning away, he needs to turn to you and look at you in the eyes and be there's things that he can do, and I think it's fair for you to ask. And I hear what you're saying about your therapist saying that you're not present. I'm going, like, I have a feeling you're hyper present. You're paying complete attention to everything that he's doing and not doing, to create the safety for you. So I don't think you're being too controlling. I think it's fair for you to say to your husband before you go out, when we're in these places, if you are doing this, I'm, have a code word, and that you mutually agree to. If you cannot, shift your behavior and be fully present with me, then then I'm going to excuse myself for whatever. Or we can go, like, then we'll leave the grocery store with the cart full, and whatever you need to do for your safety, because to me it's really, what do you need to do for your safety? And if you're having a conversation with him so that there's an expectation, then implementing, after doing what you say you're going to do, is actually what we're all supposed to do. So, but I'm really sorry. That's, like, how unpleasant, uncomfortable for you.
mm-hmm.
And I would dread going anywhere with him if, if everything was like, I'm going to have to be paying attention to everybody and
Mm-hmm.
not enjoy the time. And maybe that's, I don't enjoy the time with you. I want to enjoy. Here's what I need for my safety to be able to go on an outing with you. So, so it's so obvious that life was hard in the past and ended up in addiction, shame, home. How the heck do we really rise to the mountain of challenges with a boulder of shame? He says it's too much. He started the work and it's overwhelming. I feel it. How do we ever do this work? One day at a time, one situation at a time, one step at a time. You're here, it's one meeting at a time. Like, oh my gosh, it is insurmountable, and looking at all of that. But my friend Kristin Snowden, like I've shared this before. I was out running, and like I was thinking of this huge thing I messed up with, and then I went, I'm doing the whole "you're such an idiot" and all, and then I went, wait, no, that's the wrong voice. The story I'm telling myself is, that I'm an idiot and all of those shame voices, and I went, no, I stopped myself in that moment and went, I'm a person of worth, and this is a situation, and I'm going to do the best I can, and it will be okay, and it was, and so it really is one thing at a time. The 12 steps are 12 steps. Why? Because you're not doing an escalator and running through them. It's one thing at a time and one day at a time. And I got an email from somebody. I have to share this real quick. And she reached out, and he's doing his work. And she said, it's been a year and a half. And she didn't believe me when I said, it can get better. You guys can have a relationship that's more honest, more true than you could have even imagined having before. And she said, you were right. He's doing the work. They're making progress. And I was incredibly grateful to hear, because I love hearing those. I know the pain, but I love hearing the stories where people are just for today, I'm going to do the next right thing, and things start to shift. So
I agree with everything Tammy just said.
yeah. There's hope, and here for betrayed partners, and I'm sorry when the addict doesn't get a clue, but you know what? You can find joy and you can find peace despite that. Get support for you. There's a billion resilient women in these billion. There's lots of resilient women that are coming in partners, or they're coming to this, and they're finding that their addict's behavior does not have to, ruin their life and steal all their joy. And it's a process. I'm not saying it's easy, but a little at a time. You go, he's going to choose to stay in the muck and the mire. I'm not going to. I'm going to choose something different for me. So we're really late. Thank you for hanging in there, Kristin. I so appreciate it. So, check out the resources we've shared. Reach out to KristinSnowden.com. It's her website. You can reach out to her. I send lots of people to her groups, betrayed partner work groups, etc. So join those. Check out the stuff on our resources, and come back and see us. Eddie Caparucci, Getting to the Other Side, will be next week. So bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much.